It's time for Ask Mike Mondays. Mike answers one listener's question every week. Here's Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
Welcome to Ask Mike Mondays. I'm your host, Paul Peebles, National Underwriter for Old Capital. And look who it is, Mr. Michael Becker.
Hey, Paul.
How are you, sir?
Things are going good. I'm wrapping the summer up here, so it's nice and hot in Texas.
It is very nice and hot in Texas. Thank God that most of us have good air conditioning in our houses and maybe a pool to swim in. But you guys took a couple of vacations this year. What was probably the best vacation you guys took?
We did two big ones. So I went to Italy, the Amalfi Coast, and then went to Hawaii. So if you buy a bunch of apartments, that's kind of what I figured out. It's funny enough that I ran into one of the prominent Dallas apartment brokers at a luau in the middle of Kauai, as well as I ran into my buddy Ken McElroy in Amalfi, Italy. So Ken from Phoenix, who owns 10,000 units or whatever. He's just randomly having lunch at the same time I'm in Amalfi. So it's been a good market when stuff like that happens.
That's pretty darn good. Ken owns what? You say 10,000 doors?
Something like that.
And so if you don't know Michael Becker and his group over SPI, they have bought over 8,000 doors. They own right now probably about 5,800. Am I saying that right?
That sounds about right, yep.
At about $675 million in assets under management. They've closed over $1 billion worth of transactions and raised about $160 million in equity. If you didn't know Michael, you would say that you would think of him as a banker like me, because he grew up in the banks and learned his basic education about money from being a banker. He was one of the highest rated bankers with one of the largest national banks in the country. He led his division for a number of years and lent over billions of dollars in commercial real estate loans. So Michael knows his stuff. So we turned to Michael to answer a few questions in the Ask Mike Mondays. And so we're going to start off with the final question, is we're in a 5-part series about being successful in transactions. The final one, number 5, is really, I think, is the core of the deal, because you got to not only you find them and you raise money to buy them, you close on the loan, but how do you operate them? So the question right now is for Ask Mike Monday. Michael, what is important in closing the transaction for number 1? What do I need to do? And then post-closing, what do we do after that?
Yeah, so we'll kind of just talk about maybe the escrow process and kind of the first few days, a few weeks of kind of takeover and the time we have today. But really, when you're running escrow, we've kind of talked about how do you build your list, how do you identify brokers, how do you get awarded the deals, how do you finance them now, then how do you kind of process the transaction. So, with the way we're set up now, we're a little bit of, got scale. So we have a guy on our team that all he does is kind of just run escrows for us. Either we're buying, selling, and kind of processes a debt. But when you're starting out, you do everything, right? You do the $5 an hour task as well as the $5,000 hour task. So making sure you're running escrows. So one of the most critical things I think you get is a critical dates letter. So ask the title company to prepare a critical dates letter. So they'll go through the purchase and sale agreement or the PSA and identify like when's your due diligence period over and when's financial contingency if you have it, the close date, any extension options. And they'll kind of put all those little hurdles out there and on a calendar and make sure that the buyer and the seller and everyone agree that these are the actual dates when these 30 days from effective date or 60 days from effective date. Those are kind of the dates that are listed in the PSA, and they'll actually put them on a calendar. And then one of the things I would recommend is you go to your calendar system, your Google calendars, whatever you use, and put those dates in your calendar so hey, this day by this time, is it at noon or is it at 5 p.m. or is it Central or Eastern or whatever the time zone is, and make sure you know exactly when everything is due. One, and then making sure that you're getting the closing checklist from both your lender as well as the title company, and make sure that you're going through everything, and your lender needs a certain level of diligence, and that your lawyer is doing all the legal diligence that they're supposed to do along the way, and making sure they're getting the opinion letters out and all the various things that your lender is going to require, as well as with the title company you're going through and doing all the various closing items, like making sure the survey's in good order so they can issue the title policy with the proper endorsements in place, making sure that you're going through all the prorations, making sure you understand who is owed what in the purchase sale agreement on the prorations, from rent to maybe taxes to the bills that the property incurs and you're going to collect as a bill back to the residents 30 or 60 days later. So just kind of making sure you go through all those, and we always go independently verify every single one of those calculations. We never just assume that what the seller sends us is correct, so we're going through and making sure that we're independently verifying and it makes sense to us. So those are a lot of the stuff that you're doing. And then, of course, the day of closing or day before closing, make sure all the money's at title and you're chasing all the signatures you need. So if you have a bunch of different KPs, one of the things we always try to make sure is everyone's vacation schedule, travel schedule, that we're kind of, just being prepared and ahead of time, so we don't have a last minute scramble when someone's out of town and we got to either chase a signature or wire some money in or something like that. And then once you close, a lot of the hard work's kind of behind you as a sponsor, especially if you have a third party management company. But just making sure that the management company's aware of all the timelines and they are prepared for takeover the day of closing. Making sure all your checking accounts are set up, they have staff in place, and they come take over the property kind of operationally. And then, a lot of the work's kind of on them, but, you need to make sure you give them proper guidance and kind of what the business plan is and the capital needs, both from a kind of improvement standpoint. So what the capital improvements are, kind of, we're going to upgrade, half the units, and we're going to do this sort of upgrade package, as well as kind of the common area exterior stuff. And then your lender will have a bunch of like immediate needs from time to time, especially these older buildings. When they're doing their property condition report, they'll identify some immediate needs that you need to go through and address. So maybe you have some trip hazards, or the parking lot has a bunch of potholes, or staircases have some steps that are broken, or whatever it is. So they'll give you a whole list of immediates, as well as maybe if you're, a lot of these loans that we do here at Old Capital have the green program here to get the better pricing. So all that stuff has a definitive timeline. So a lot of the immediate stuffs are either 60 or 90 days to get them done, and then the green stuff is either 6 or 12 months to get it done. And then you have to get all these things done. So just making sure you understand what all the lender acquired items are, one, and then two, what the timelines are, and making sure that you're effectively communicating that to the management company, or you understand it if you're the one that's going to go out and actually implement the improvements yourself. So those are a long rambling list, Paul. What did I miss here?
Well, I think we're going to hold off until segment number 2 of number 5, talking a little bit about what to expect from your lender after the loan closes. But let's go back to this post-closing stuff about the closing transaction. A couple of things that you talked about that I want to get clarification on, because a lot of people don't know what the heck that means. What's an attorney opinion letter? Why is that important?
So when you're getting a loan, you give an organizational chart or an org chart to your lender, kind of showing that, hey, here's the manager of the entity, and here's kind of the key principles and their ownership percentage. And then, usually you'll kind of have a blanket, like, hey, no one's going to own more than 20% for the remaining 75, 80% of the equity that the sponsors don't contribute. And at the final, you have to give them like your exhibit A to your company agreement, or whatever you call it. It's kind of the roster of investors that you have and what everyone owns. And then part of it is, you have the manager and kind of the org chart. Then your lawyer has to write an opinion letter that is their opinion that the manager is, the entity is duly formed and it's all in good order with the state, as well as that the person who's signing these documents have authority to sign the documents on behalf of the entity. And if there's a mistake, they can go sue your lawyer and their insurance to kind of protect them. So it's just like an additional layer of security for your lender.
Okay, so that's an important piece that happens right at the very end. You need to have your attorney build an attorney opinion letter. And typically what happens is that the lender gives a kind of a copy.
Form.
Yeah, a form of what they want to see in that attorney opinion letter. It's going to cost you anywhere from $2,500 to $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 to have that form completed by the attorney on your behalf.
And it's got to be in the state where the entity is organized. So like we had a large loan once where they made us form an entity in Delaware. So then we had to hire, I guess there's a whole cottage industry around lawyers that write opinion letters in the state of Delaware. So it cost us, like Paul said, $4,000 or $5,000 to get this opinion letter.
Cha-ching.
Yeah. On top of the opinion letter, our Texas-based lawyer had to give us.
Yeah. So then also you talked about maybe you did a UCC. Why is that important?
Yeah, we didn't talk about that, but your lender's going to require UCC searches. So on all the borrowing entities, as well as all the KPs or key principles in the deal. So basically going to do like a database search and see if there's any sort of like outstanding liens or pending lawsuits or anything like that in the state for both the seller, the buying entities, and all the KPs involved. And then if there's any sort of items that are identified, you need to address them. So, if you have a common name, there'll be a whole lot of false positives that kind of match. So you just need to say it's a false positive. I'm not Michael Becker that committed a felony in New Jersey because I've never been there or whatever. So you'll have a bunch of that hits. Or if there is legitimately something with you, then you need to write a letter of explanation on what happened and, kind of make sure that they're comfortable.
What do UCCs typically cost? I mean, I know a credit report that you pull is anywhere from, $10, $15, $35 or $40. What are UCC's costs?
So it depends on the extent the lender wants and how many people are involved, how many is involved. But usually, $2,000-3,000 kind of on the low end, and then if you have 5 different KPs on your loan, you can spend $6,000-7,000, maybe $8,000 on the high end to get these searches done.
So it's a cost. Put that into your checklist of additional costs on the deal, but it's going to be required typically on a Fannie Freddie loan. You're going to have UCCs. May need it for a bank transaction, may not, but just be prepared for that. Another thing is we talked about closing, about who owes money to who. When you close on a transaction and the seller is holding deposits from the tenants, who owns the lease deposits?
Yeah, so it's a liability for the ownership group. So when you're closing on a deal, the security deposits held by the seller get credited to the buyer at close.
So that could be a large number that gets pushed.
Yeah, it could be tens of thousands, depending on the size of the deal.
Okay, and then another question is that when you do a Fannie or Freddie Mac loan, you usually have escrows for taxes, insurance, and replacement reserves. Money that has to be put back into the property. Kind of things that are falling apart on the property. A property is a living, breathing body. You got to put money back into it. So the lenders kind of want you to have a savings account that says that you'll put money back into the property for things that you're going to use over and over and over again. So who owns that money? So between the buyer and the seller, let's say the money's in the seller's account, it's his money. Is it really his money, or does it get transferred over to you?
Yeah, so those monies, as long as they sell the loan free and clear, so meaning that you're going to put new financing on it, the seller would get credited either as a reduced payoff by their lender, or after they close, will get reimbursed. A couple weeks after they close, they'll get credited back or reimbursed from the lender. If it's a loan assumption, you're going to go in and buy the deal and take over someone's existing mortgage. The buyer has to credit the seller for those escrow amounts, because they're going to then take over the mortgage and take over those escrows with the lender.
So that could be a large number too, because maybe it's $300 a door times 100 doors. That's $30,000 that you have to put aside into those accounts. So just know that if you're filling those buckets up with money, you just have to have money left over when you're doing your checklist at the closing table, that you have the cash to do it. So anything else you want to add to that, Michael?
No, that's it. I think going through these are just some things to think about when you're closing on a transaction. All the escrows you got to replace, and making sure that you're thinking through the dates, any sort of impacts on travel or other life events that you have going on. So make sure you kind of think through that. You plan ahead of it. Make sure that your lawyer's going to be in town around the time of closing. And these are all things that we just make sure on every transaction we get in, that we kind of look forward on a calendar and see if there's any sort of impacts, and that we plan around those.
Yeah, you can't imagine the last minute phone calls, last minute emails that go back and forth with somebody that didn't recognize that date on the calendar, or what it was never pushed over to them, and how much money that's at risk and involved in these deals that you are definitely going to be liable for if you didn't read the calendar correctly, or you didn't have your title company or somebody put together a critical dates list on what all these hurdles are going to be done. So I think it's some great information. We're going to go with part B. We're not going to do it today. We'll do it next time. Really on what to expect from your lender after the loan closes, because I think that's an important piece that a lot of people don't realize, that this is not a home loan, that the money goes out and then the lender never comes back to see you. On these transactions, the lender comes back and sees you quite often. So we'll talk a little bit about that on section B of the number 5 podcast.
What we haven't talked about, Paul, is Old Capitol Conference.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Michael. So Old Capitol Conference, do not forget, October 24th, 25th in Dallas, Texas. It doesn't make a difference if you are from Dallas. In fact, I would like to see not so many regular faces, but I'd like to see a lot of faces from other parts of the country. It is not just a regional conference. It is a national conference. So we're looking for a lot of people to come throughout the United States, to come to Texas and meet different people throughout the country. If you're thinking about putting together a partnership, a transaction, you need equity, you want to put money into an equity, this is a great place to meet the movers and shakers to put together a multifamily syndication. So great opportunity to come on October 24th, 25th to Dallas. So go to the oldcapitalpodcast.com website, oldcapitalpodcast.com website, download into the RSVP. We'd love to see you. I think it's a great conference. Michael, what do you think about those conferences?
Yeah, no, I think we should have 600-700 of our closest friends from all over the country. I was shocked the first year we did it, how many people I didn't know. and we're from all over. So I think it's a great thing if you guys want to get networked and do this business and be serious. It's like I said, it's not a business you could do from your behind your computer at your home or your office. You got to go out, get network, get to know and meet people, and that's kind of how you form relationships and these deals get done. If
you wanted to build a better relationship with Michael Becker, you definitely want to come to listen to him there because he'll be up on stage. But if you wanted to learn a little bit more about syndication of what Michael Becker does, Michael, what's the best way for somebody to get a hold of you?
Yeah, the easiest way is just go to a company's website, which is my company's SPI Advisory. That's how we raise capital and do deals. So simply go to www.spiadvisory.com. That's SPI, like spy, advisory.com. There's a contact us form. Fill that out. I'm always happy to have a 10 to 15-minute telephone call with listeners I meet off the podcast.
That's great. Great information, Michael. We appreciate that. Let's get listening to the podcast number 5.B next time. And we appreciate everybody listening. Again, I'm Paul Peebles. That was Michael Becker. Have a great day.